Hey everyone, this is Grizzle again, the artist behind Melancholy Monsters Club, and I just wanted to hop on here and set up part 2 of the video that I was making this morning on how to create layers, how to turn a basic layer into an actual NFT using the apps Procreate and Photoshop. In order to use Procreate, you're going to need an Apple iPad and an Apple Pencil. If you want to make the NFTs the way that I did, that's what you're going to need. And then you're going to need to download Procreate, which is $9.99 in the App Store. You can make your NFTs by hand, just pen on paper. One of my favorite projects, the Sketchy Ape Book Club, made their NFTs that way, and they're amazing. So you could always make them by hand and then scan them and upload them into Photoshop, but you are still going to need Photoshop in order to create the layers. So if you're going to do it by hand, just skip ahead to the second half of this video where I go over Photoshop. But if you're going to use Procreate, that's what we're going to do right now. So open up the Procreate app and choose which file you're going to be working on. You could just import that from your photo gallery on your iPad, or you can airdrop it to your iPad. And the first thing that you're going to want to do is choose which brush you want to work with. There are a lot of different brushes and a lot of different settings for brushes, so I would try out a few different ones. So I'm just going to show you a couple, then I'll show you the one that I like to use. So there are a lot of different settings. For me, the only settings that I change, I leave everything the same except for these, the amount of streamline and the amount of stabilization. I usually keep those between 25 and 85% depending on what I'm working on. And that basically helps your lines to look more smooth and less shaky, which can happen if you're not used to using the Apple Pencil. The lines can come out looking quite shaky and almost jagged looking. So I would, try out a few brushes that look good to you and then just test them out. You could see here that if you make a line and then you hold it at the end before you lift up the Apple Pencil, it turns it into a more perfect shape. For me, I don't like those perfect lines or perfect shapes. Sometimes they come into, in handy. For example, when I was making the fishing pole for the collection, I wanted it to be the lines of the fishing pole to be really straight and parallel to each other. So I did use that tool. But it just depends on what you're making. For the monsters, there's a lot of, I like the kind of imperfect cartoony look, so that's what I do. For me, I use the script pen. I like the brush and the script pen, but I use the script more often. And I tend to keep the streamline and the stabilization around 80%. Depending on what I'm doing, for example, if you're writing words, if you're lettering, you want to bring your streamline down as low as possible because it's just going to mess you up. But if you want your lines to look really nice and smooth, bring them up to 60 to 80%. Same thing with the stabilization and the streamline. They're very similar features. Okay, now that I have the brush that I want, I'm going to just perfect the pressure and the thickness of the brush stroke. You can do that with the slider to the left, or you can do that just simply by holding down the Apple Pencil with more pressure. The less pressure you put, the thinner your line is. The more pressure you put, the thicker your line is. So I would just test it out. I like to use medium pressure. So when I'm drawing right now, I'm using medium pressure, and then I'll adjust the size on the left to how I want it. So I'm just going to go in over the nose just to see if the pressure and the size is the way that I want it, and it is. So I'm going to come over here to the side, and I'm going to do a little practice nose just to make sure all of the settings are exactly what I want. The streamline, the stabilization, the size, the pressure, the color, everything. I mean, right now I'm using black and white, but if I were using a different color, I just want to practice it out on the side. So now I'm just going to go through and show you kind of how I make try to get my lines to be as clean and smooth as possible. If you want to go through and see a little bit more, you can watch the last video that I did where I was talking about our project, but you can really see me kind of going through all of the lines, just making sure everything looks clean. So, for example, with this, I'm just going to keep going back over it as much as I need to with the black and the white pen, because if I want to make something cleaner, I don't want to use the erase tool, because you could see here, if I choose the eraser tool, it makes it really jagged. So if I want to make the eye smaller, it makes more sense to use a white brush rather than the eraser brush. So you could see I'm going to go through and just make the eye smaller. It makes it so much cleaner. And that's how I get all of my lines to just be as smooth as I want them. I do want them to be a little bit kind of messy looking because I want it to look cartoony, but I don't want it to be as rough as the eraser brushes. For the nose, it makes sense to do it that way. But for everything else, it doesn't really make sense to use the eraser. So now I'm happy with this. I'm going to save it. I'm going to select the image, share as a JPEG or a PNG, and then you're just going to want to email it to yourself or airdrop it to your computer. All right, now that we made our base layer of our NFT, we want to start creating more layers of accessories, clothing, whatever you want it to be. So for me, I'm just going to, for the purpose of showing you how to do this, I'm just going to make a very simple, silly t-shirt. If this were my real NFT project, I would be a lot more careful with how I'm doing this, but I just want to show you guys how to do this. So you could see I am just basically drawing the t-shirt over the body. So I'm just going to draw outside of the body a little bit so it looks more realistic, a little bit boxier. So I drew the sleeve a little bit wider than the arm. I'm going to draw the other sleeve a little bit wider than the arm, and then I'm going to draw the bottom of the shirt a little bit wider than the body, just because I want it to look like it's more of a layer that's on top of the layer that I already created. So right now I'm just doing a very rough sketch. I don't need the lines to be perfect. I just want to see where this is going to fall on the body that I already created. And then once I get it where I want it, I'm going to go through and do the same thing I showed you with the original layer and just make the lines really smooth. For the arm, I don't need that arm because it's not attached to the shirt. I only need what's attached to the shirt. So I'm going to erase anything that's not, but that actually is attached to the shirt, but the fingers are not attached to the shirt, so I'm just going to erase that. And then once I have erased everything, I just don't want anything touching the shirt because I'm going to go through and remove this layer, and then in Photoshop, we're going to put it on top of the body that we created. So now I'm just going to go through and just make everything as smooth as I can. I just want the lines to look really smooth. I don't want them to look rough. Again, if this was a shirt that was really going into my NFT project, I would be spending hours tediously making sure that every single line was as smooth and perfect as it was. But just for the sake of this video, I'm not really going to worry about it too much, but I do need it to be at least a little bit clean, because once we go through and remove the shirt and color it in, I need the lines to be clean. All right, so now I am I'm just fixing up something that I am not really liking this shoulder, so I'm trying to clean that up a bit, but I'm gonna now make a design on the shirt. So I'm gonna do like a smiley face shirt. And I'm just trying to get the circle how I want it, put some eyes in there. I'm thinking like 90s, vintage 90s smiley face shirt. I'm just gonna thin out this circle because I don't like how thick it is compared to the other lines. And now it's done. And we can bring this into Photoshop and create a new layer. So we're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna go back into the gallery and select it and save that. All right, now we're in Photoshop and we've got our first layer that we created, and we just need to go to the layers, unlock this layer. We're gonna rename this as body or skin or whatever you want to name it. Create a new layer. We're gonna name that background. And then we're gonna drag that underneath the body, go back to the body, make sure that the body layer is selected. We're gonna go to the magic wand tool, click the white background, and then just delete that. Just click delete on your keyboard. And then if yours is like mine, you're gonna need to go through and delete some of the other parts that would be showing a background. So I've got these areas in between the arm and the tentacles, and I just need to make sure I delete those as well. All right, so when you're done, you hit deselect, make sure you deselect that. And then you can go through and choose what background color you want. I'm gonna do, I think like an orangey color, or maybe a minty. Yeah, like a muted minty color. And then you're just gonna go to the paint bucket tool. You're gonna just click the background and then it'll fill it in layer. It'll fill that in, but make sure it's selected the background layer. If you select the body layer, it won't do that. All right, so you can have a bunch of different layers, a bunch of different backgrounds, however you want to do that. So I'm going to make another body, and I'm just going to go through, click the layer, duplicate the layer, okay, and then the same with the background. I'm going to click the layer, duplicate the layer, okay, and then what you're going to want to do is make sure you go in and rename those. And I'm just going to choose a new background color here. And now you can see the different layers by toggling on and off these eye tools. So if I unclick the top one, it'll show the bottom one. If I unclick both of them, it'll show only the body layer. So that's important to know, because when you go through and save your layers individually, you're going to need to toggle on that eye tool on and off. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to start to make my first skin. So I'm going to do a forest green skin. And I'm going to want to go to just pick my color. I think I'll do that one. And then use the paint bucket tool and just fill it in anywhere that it needs to be. You could see there's a little spot on the pinky that didn't get filled in, so just make sure you zoom in and get everything. Don't leave anything blank. Sometimes you need to get in a little bit closer just to fill something in. So I'm going to go through now and I'm just going to color in the eyes and the spots and just pick different colors. It's the same thing. You're going to just choose a color, choose the paint bucket tool, and just fill everything in. So I'm just going to go through and fill everything in with the colors that I chose for the bottom of the tentacles, the lips, the eyes, and the spots. And this is the part of making the NFTs. Well, actually, pretty much the entire process of making NFTs is very tedious and time consuming, but this is the part for me that's relaxing. I really enjoy this. All right, so now I've got it filled in, and I'm going to go over to my other layer, and I'm not going to fill it in right now, but you can, I mean, really what I did when I made my project is I just went in and, oops, I forgot some of these spots over here, but I just went in and I created a bunch of different skins, and I created a bunch of different eyes, mouths, hats, clothing, accessories, and you just got to go through layer by layer and do each one. So I'm going to grab the t-shirt that we made on Procreate. I'm going to grab the lasso tool and just cut that out. And then I'm going to copy, paste. I'm going to grab the magic wand tool again and select this white, delete that, deselect it, and then I'm going to come down here and drag the shirt onto the body as accurately as I can. So I'm not going to be super accurate because this is just, an example for you all to see, but I'm going to need to go through with the eraser tool and just erase the imperfections on here. And then I'm going to need to go back in with the white, add in, because I didn't do this perfectly when I was drawing. Like I said, I was rushing. But if this was my real NFT project, I would go through and make sure everything was absolutely perfect on here if I was putting this t-shirt into my collection, which I'm not. So now I've got the t-shirt finished. Like I said, all I did was go through with the eraser brush, cleaned it up a little bit, and then I went in with the black paint tool in some spots where it just looked funky. And now the fun part is just to color in the shirt. So I'm gonna just choose some colors, finish up this shirt here. Same thing, or just choose the color, fill it in with the paint bucket tool. Super relaxing in my opinion. I love doing this. And that's it. That's the first layer of clothing that we made for our little fake collection today. So I'm just going to name this layer Smiley Face T. And what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to group these layers. So I'm going to name this clothing. I'm going to create a new folder. You're just clicking that folder that's down at the bottom. Drag that down. And I'm going to name this skins. So I've got my forest green skin in here so far. I can make as many others as I want to. And now I'm going to do another layer of backgrounds. So, you could do as many groups as you want to. For our collection, we have backgrounds, skins, eyes, mouths, hats, clothing, and accessories. And you could put as many layers in that as you want to. So in order to create your NFT project, what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to save each one of these individually. So first you're going to want to go through and save all your backgrounds. So you need to unclick everything, make sure only one of your backgrounds is selected, and then you're going to go as save a copy, and then save it as a PNG file, and then do the same with all of your other layers. Save the layer itself with nothing else attached to it as a PNG file. You're going to save the backgrounds in a separate folder, the skins in a separate folder, clothing, everything in its own folder. Make sure you name it and label it as what it is. And there you have it. That's how to make one hypothetical NFT from Procreate and Photoshop. If you have any questions about this, leave me a comment. And if there's any other videos that you want me to make on the artistic part of it, let me know. Like and subscribe. Thanks, guys.